I'm Katherine Wilson, 28. And I never thought I'd be the one to destroy my father in court. After Mom died, Dad wasted no time claiming everything she owned, including the house she'd left specifically to me in her will. Standing in that courtroom, watching him lie through his teeth about caring for her during her illness, something inside me snapped. I leaned over to my lawyer and whispered 2 words: secret basement. The color drained from Dad's face. The judge, seeing his reaction, demanded an explanation. What happened next changed our family forever. Before I dive into this painful story, I'm curious where you're all watching from today. This family drama took me to the darkest places I've ever been, but sharing it has been healing. If you've ever faced betrayal from someone who should have protected you, you're not alone. Hit that like button if you've had to stand up for yourself against family, and subscribe to follow my journey of healing and rebuilding after everything fell apart. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a picture-perfect suburban Pennsylvania home with my parents, James and Elizabeth Wilson. From the outside, we were the ideal American family. But behind closed doors, the reality was much different. My father, James Wilson, built his real estate development business from the ground up. He was charming, charismatic, and knew exactly what to say to make people like him. Business associates, neighbors, even our extended family all thought he hung the moon. "Your father is such a generous man," they'd say. "You're so lucky to have him." But at home, Dad's mask would slip. He ran our household like one of his construction sites, with rigid rules, exact expectations, and consequences for any perceived disobedience. Mom was his opposite in every way. Elizabeth Wilson taught 4th grade at the local elementary school for over 20 years. Where Dad was harsh, Mom was gentle. When Dad demanded perfection, Mom encouraged growth. She was the buffer between his controlling nature and my developing sense of self, often taking the brunt of his displeasure to shield me. "Katherine, sweetheart," she'd whisper after one of Dad's tirades about my grades or friends or clothes. "You don't have to be perfect to be loved. Not by me." My memories of childhood are a patchwork of walking on eggshells around Dad and finding refuge with Mom. Dad would criticize my appearance at breakfast, claiming it was for my own good. Mom would later slip me a note in my lunchbox saying I looked beautiful. Dad would ground me for getting a B+ instead of an A. Mom would secretly bring books to my room to help me study. As I grew older, the pattern of Dad's emotional manipulation became clearer. He'd withdraw affection when I didn't meet his expectations. He'd gaslight me about promises he'd made or things he'd said. "I never told you that you could go to Sarah's party. You must have dreamed it." Even when I had text messages proving otherwise, arguing was futile. Mom did her best to nurture my independence in small ways Dad wouldn't notice. She encouraged me to apply to colleges out of state, knowing Dad wanted me nearby to eventually work in the family business. When I got accepted to nursing school at Penn State, Dad refused to contribute a penny toward my education. "If you're not studying business or working for me, you're on your own," he declared at dinner, throwing my acceptance letter across the table. What I didn't know then was that Mom had been secretly saving for years. The night after Dad's ultimatum, she came to my room with an envelope containing enough money for my first year's tuition. "This is your life, Katherine," she said, her eyes fierce with determination. "Not his. Promise me, you'll live it on your terms." I graduated with my nursing degree and later completed my nurse practitioner program, settling in Philadelphia, about 45 minutes from my parents' home in Westbrook. Dad never attended a single graduation ceremony. In his mind, I had betrayed the family by not joining his business. Mom came to everything. Always alone, always proud. 2 years ago, Mom started losing weight rapidly. What we thought was stress turned out to be stage 4 ovarian cancer. The diagnosis was devastating. The prognosis worse. 6 months to a year, they said. I immediately took FMLA leave from the hospital where I worked. There was no question in my mind about what needed to be done. Mom had always been there for me. Now I would be there for her. Dad's response to Mom's illness was surprising even for him. Rather than stepping up as her husband of 35 years, he became more absent than ever. "Someone has to keep making money for these medical bills," he'd say. though I later discovered Mom had excellent insurance through her teaching job. While I was helping Mom through chemo, managing her medications, holding her hair back when she was sick, and taking her to endless doctor appointments, Dad was rarely home. In Mom's final weeks, as hospice care began, I moved back into my childhood bedroom to be available around the clock. Dad maintained his usual work schedule, sometimes not coming home until after Mom was asleep. One night, when Mom's pain was particularly bad, I called him repeatedly. He didn't answer. He showed up the next morning with a weak excuse about his phone battery dying. The night before Mom died, she asked to speak with me alone. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were clear. "Katherine," she whispered, holding my hand with what little strength she had left. "There are things you don't know. Things I've protected you from. Promise me you'll look in my studio after I'm gone. Behind the painting of our lake house. Promise me you'll protect the truth." I promised, not understanding what she meant but knowing it was important. She died the next morning with me by her side. Dad arrived 30 minutes after she was gone, having ignored my urgent texts that her breathing had changed. At the funeral, Dad played the part of grieving husband perfectly. He accepted condolences with a solemn face, spoke eloquently about their life together, and even managed to produce tears during his eulogy. Meanwhile, he barely acknowledged me, the daughter who had actually been there through every painful moment of Mom's illness. The day after we buried my mother, Dad went back to work. "Life goes on," he said callously, leaving me alone to sort through Mom's belongings and handle the initial estate matters. I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning of his betrayal. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was boxing up Mom's art supplies in her small studio when I found an envelope with my name on it tucked inside her favorite sketchbook. The letter inside was in Mom's handwriting, dated just 2 months before her death. "My dearest Katherine," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. There are things I need you to know, things I've kept from you, to protect you. Look behind my painting of the lake house, the one hanging above my desk. The combination is your birthday." My hands trembled as I carefully removed the canvas from the wall, revealing a small wall safe I'd never known existed. I entered my birthday, and the door swung open. Inside was a USB drive, another sealed envelope, and a legal document. Mom's will. The will had been executed 3 months before her death, properly witnessed and notarized. As I read through it, my confusion grew. According to this document, Mom had left the family home to me, along with her personal savings, investments, and family heirlooms. Dad was to receive only her half of their joint accounts and her retirement benefits as her spouse. There was also a specific instruction that her art collection be donated to her school's art program. This contradicted everything Dad had been saying about the estate. He had already begun talking about selling the house and had mentioned their retirement savings repeatedly. The sealed envelope contained a personal letter that explained everything. "Katherine, I know this will seem strange, but your father has separate assets you don't know about. He keeps accounts I'm not supposed to know exist. Our marriage has not been what you think for many years. Before my diagnosis, I had consulted a divorce attorney. The cancer changed my plans, but not my determination to protect you from his control. This will ensure you have security he cannot take away." I sat on the studio floor, surrounded by Mom's things, trying to process this revelation. My phone rang, startling me. It was Grace Peterson, Mom's best friend since college. "Katherine, honey, how are you holding up?" she asked. When I told her what I'd found, her long silence spoke volumes. "Your mother was afraid of this," Grace finally said. "That's why she asked me to check on you if she passed before telling you everything. James has been emotionally abusive to Elizabeth for years, controlling every aspect of her life. The cancer diagnosis came right after she'd finally worked up the courage to leave him. She stayed for the health insurance, but she was determined he wouldn't control everything after she was gone. That evening, I confronted Dad at the kitchen table, the will placed between us. "What is this?" he demanded, his face darkening as he scanned the document. "Mom's will," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "She left the house to me." Dad's reaction was explosive. He slammed his fist on the table, his face contorting with rage. "This is bullshit," he shouted. She wasn't in her right mind. You manipulated her when she was dying and drugged up on pain medication. This will never stand up in court. I didn't even know about this until today, I said. But he wasn't listening. You've always been ungrateful, he spat. Always thinking you're too good for the family business. Now you think you can steal my house? My money? After everything I've done for you and your mother? His words became increasingly threatening. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Katherine. I'll contest this. I'll make sure you get nothing. You'll regret the day you tried to turn your mother against me. He stormed out, taking the will with him. That night, I called Andrea Morgan, an attorney specializing in contested wills whom Grace had recommended. She agreed to meet me the next day. Your mother's will appears properly executed, Andrea said after reviewing my copy. But your father has already filed to contest it on grounds of undue influence. He's claiming you manipulated your mother during her illness. That's ridiculous, I said. He was barely there. I was her caretaker. We'll need to prove that, Andrea replied, and we need to act quickly. He's already filed for exclusive access to the property as the surviving spouse. With Andrea's help, I filed for an emergency order to remain in the house and prevent removal of property pending the will contest. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Dad supervising movers who were loading Mom's antique furniture into a truck. This belongs to my mother, I said, blocking the doorway. Your mother is dead, he replied coldly. And everything that was hers is mine now. The situation escalated until I had to call the police. They couldn't do much but did ask the movers to leave until the court made a determination. That night, after Dad left, I discovered several valuable pieces were already missing, including Mom's grandmother's silver and some of her jewelry. Over the next few days, I began finding Mom's hidden journals. She had documented years of Dad's controlling behavior, his financial secrecy, and his gaslighting. In several entries, she mentioned her concerns about what's hidden below and her fear of his reaction if he knew she had discovered it. I didn't understand what she meant, but I was beginning to realize that Dad's aggressive behavior wasn't just grief or anger. He was desperate to keep something hidden, something Mom had discovered. And whatever it was worth destroying our family to protect. Living in my childhood home after Mom's death felt strange, like inhabiting a familiar yet suddenly alien space. Every room held memories, but now I found myself seeing them through adult eyes. The rigid household rules, the walking on eggshells around Dad, the way Mom would subtly redirect his anger patterns, I'd accepted as normal, now revealed themselves as deeply dysfunctional. I began methodically exploring the house, not certain what I was looking for but driven by Mom's cryptic message about what's hidden below. In my parents' bedroom, I noticed Dad had already cleared out Mom's closet, leaving no trace of her. I found myself opening drawers, checking behind furniture, looking for any clue to what Mom had wanted me to know. One afternoon, while checking the mailbox, I ran into our elderly neighbor, Mr. Peterson, who had lived next door since I was a child. "Katherine, it's good to see you," he said, leaning on his cane. I was sorry to miss Elizabeth's service. My hip replacement had me laid up. We chatted about Mom for a while before he mentioned, "Your dad's been busy with that house. All those workmen coming and going a few years back, right after you went off to college. Lot of noise for nearly 3 months. Elizabeth said they were just updating the plumbing, but seemed like an awful lot of work for pipes." "Renovations?" I asked, confused. "What kind of renovations?" Mr. Peterson shrugged. "Don't rightly know. All I remember is the trucks would come early in the morning, usually when Elizabeth was already at school. Your dad was pretty secretive about it. Wouldn't say much when I asked. This was the first I'd heard of any major work on the house during my college years. That evening, I searched Mom's home office and found a folder containing house documents. Among them was a blueprint dated from when my parents first bought the house, nearly 30 years ago. I compared the layout to the current house, trying to spot differences. Everything matched except for one section of the basement. According to the original plans, the basement should have been about 15 feet longer on the north side than it currently appeared. Intrigued, I went downstairs with a measuring tape and confirmed the discrepancy. The basement seemed smaller than it should be. I examined the basement walls carefully and noticed one section of drywall that looked newer than the rest, with a slightly different texture. Behind it stood a large shelving unit filled with holiday decorations and old sports equipment, items rarely accessed. The unit wasn't secured to the wall like the others, and when I pulled it away, I found what looked like a door outline in the drywall. My heart raced as I pushed against different sections, eventually finding a spot that gave way. The false wall swung inward, revealing a hidden room about the size of a small office. Inside was a desk with a computer, filing cabinets, and stacks of documents. This was what Mom had meant by what's hidden below. The room was meticulously organized. One cabinet contained financial records going back 15 years, detailing offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Another held documentation of cash purchases, vacation properties, boats, even a small plane, all owned through shell companies. None of these assets had ever been mentioned at home. There were also photographs of Dad with a woman I didn't recognize, looking intimate at various luxury destinations. Most disturbing were Mom's records, stored separately in a red folder. She had discovered the room about a year before her diagnosis and had begun documenting everything. There were copies of bank statements, property deeds, and a letter from her attorney advising her on whistleblower options regarding what appeared to be significant tax evasion. According to her notes, Mom had estimated Dad was hiding several $1,000,000 from both her and the IRS. She had planned to use this information in their divorce, but then came her cancer diagnosis. A note dated 2 weeks after she learned about her cancer read, "Cannot pursue divorce now. Need health insurance for treatment. Will protect Katherine's future instead." I sat in that hidden room for hours, photographing documents and trying to comprehend the double life my father had been living. I faced an ethical dilemma: use the evidence to protect my inheritance or report the apparent financial crimes to authorities. But first, I needed legal advice on the implications of how I'd obtained this evidence. As I was carefully replacing documents, I heard the garage door open. Dad was home unexpectedly. I quickly exited the hidden room, pushed the shelving unit back in place, and made it upstairs just as he entered the kitchen. "What were you doing in the basement?" he asked suspiciously. Looking for some of Mom's old photo albums, I lied. "For the memorial slideshow I'm making." He seemed to accept this but watched me closely for the rest of his brief visit. The next day, I installed security cameras throughout the house, including the basement, to protect both myself and the evidence. That night, I had a recurring nightmare I'd experienced since Mom's death. I was trapped in our family home while it slowly filled with water. But this time, instead of drowning, I found a hidden door that led to safety. When I woke, I understood what my subconscious had been trying to tell me. Mom had left me the key to freedom from Dad's control, just as she'd always tried to do throughout my life. "Your father has hired Thomas Reynolds," Andrea told me during our pre-trial preparation meeting. "He's known for aggressive litigation tactics and has a reputation for winning at all costs." We were in her downtown Philadelphia office, surrounded by case files and legal pads. For the past week, we'd been preparing our strategy to defend Mom's will against Dad's contest. "Reynolds will try to paint you as a manipulative daughter who took advantage of your dying mother," Andrea continued. "The burden of proof in contesting a will is on the challenger, but Reynolds is skilled at creating doubt about testamentary capacity." Mom knew exactly what she was doing, I insisted. Her doctors will confirm she was mentally sound until the very end. "Yes, and we're gathering those witnesses," Andrea assured me. "We've scheduled depositions with her oncologist, her nurses, and her friends who visited during her final months. We also need people who can testify about your regular presence as her caregiver." My colleague Amanda had already agreed to testify about my frequent visits to Mom and the FMLA leave I'd taken. We were building a solid case, but Dad's aggressive legal maneuvers kept coming. Through discovery, we learned he was claiming to have been Mom's primary caregiver, a blatant lie that infuriated me. "He's saying I abandoned the family years ago when I left for college," I said, my voice breaking with anger as I read through his deposition. "He claims I only showed up at the end to influence Mom's estate planning." "It's a standard tactic," Andrea replied calmly. "Make you so angry you lose focus. We need to stay strategic." Unexpected support came from my Aunt Judith, Mom's sister, who flew in from Arizona after hearing about the will contest. Your mother called me a few months before she passed. Judith told me over coffee in Mom's kitchen. She said if anything happened, I should come help you. She was worried about James's reaction. Judith shared childhood stories that revealed Dad's controlling behavior had started early in their relationship. Elizabeth was so vibrant before she met him, she said sadly. She wanted to travel, maybe teach abroad. But James needed everything his way. Slowly, she gave up her dreams to keep the peace. While searching Mom's bedroom closet for documents Andrea had requested, I discovered a shoebox containing audio recordings from Mom's therapy sessions. She had been secretly recording her sessions with her therapist's permission, documenting the emotional abuse she'd experienced. Listening to Mom's voice describing her fear of Dad was heartbreaking but provided crucial evidence of her state of mind when creating her will. As the court date approached, Dad's behavior became increasingly erratic. One evening, my security camera alerted me to movement in the backyard. I watched live footage of Dad trying to enter the house with a key that no longer worked. I'd changed the locks after the moving truck incident. When he realized he couldn't get in, he pounded on the back door. I called the police before confronting him through the door. "This is still my house," he shouted. "You have no right to change the locks. The court order says I can remain here until the estate is settled," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Please leave before the police arrive." His face contorted with rage. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Katherine. When this is over, you'll have nothing. I'll make sure of it." The police arrived minutes later, but Dad had already left. Officer Mark Daniels took my statement about the incident. "We can document the threat, but unfortunately, there's not much else we can do right now," he explained. "If you feel unsafe, you might consider staying elsewhere until the court hearing." But I refused to be driven from Mom's house. Instead, I installed additional security measures and began receiving support from an unexpected community, Mom's teaching colleagues and friends who had witnessed Dad's controlling behavior over the years. They organized a schedule so someone was always with me at the house, a protective circle that gave me strength. Dad's intimidation tactics extended beyond direct confrontation. He began telling extended family members that I had manipulated Mom during her illness, causing several relatives to call with concerns. "Your father says you forced your mother to change her will when she was heavily medicated," my cousin Mark said during one such call. "That doesn't sound like you, Kat," but he was pretty convincing. "It's not true," I replied wearily, having had this conversation multiple times. Mom changed her will months before she was on significant pain medication. She knew exactly what she was doing. Some believed me, others didn't. The family was fracturing exactly as Dad had intended. The night before the court hearing, Andrea called with final preparations. "Be prepared for Reynolds to get personal," she warned. "He'll try to provoke an emotional reaction from you. Stay calm, answer truthfully, and remember we have facts on our side." After hanging up, I felt drawn to the basement one last time. In the hidden room, I noticed a small crevice in the wall that I hadn't explored before. Reaching inside, my fingers touched something plastic. I pulled out a USB drive taped to the inside of the wall, cleverly hidden. Written on it in Mom's handwriting was a single word: proof. I wonder if any of you have ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew. The court hearing was just hours away, and I had no idea what was on this USB drive or how it might affect our case. If you're facing your own family battle right now, know that sometimes the truth hides in the most unexpected places. I'm curious what you would do in my situation. Let me know in the comments if you'd open the drive immediately or wait until after court. Now, let me tell you what happened when my father took the stand. The county courthouse was an imposing granite building that had intimidated me since childhood when Dad would point it out, saying, "That's where they punish people who break the rules." Now, as I walked up those steps beside Andrea, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. Dad and his attorney, Thomas Reynolds, were already seated at the plaintiff's table when we entered. Dad didn't acknowledge me, but I caught him watching my reflection in his water glass. He was dressed in a conservative navy suit, his silver hair perfectly trimmed, the very picture of a respectable widower. I noticed he'd strategically seated several business associates in the rows directly behind him, creating the impression of widespread support. I recognized a few of them but knew they weren't actual friends, just people who benefited from their connection to him. Judge Eleanor Blackwell entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for no-nonsense proceedings. She reviewed the case briefly before inviting opening statements. Reynolds went first, his voice smooth and practiced as he painted a picture designed to evoke sympathy. Your Honor, James Wilson shared 35 years of marriage with Elizabeth Wilson. During her tragic illness, their daughter Katherine, who had been estranged from the family for years, suddenly reappeared. Mere months before Elizabeth's death, while heavily medicated and vulnerable, a new will mysteriously appeared, disinheriting the loving husband who had built their life together. I gripped Andrea's hand under the table as Reynolds continued his fictional account of my supposed manipulation. When he described Dad as devoted to his wife's care during her final days, I nearly stood up in protest. Andrea squeezed my hand, reminding me to stay calm. Her opening statement was measured and factual. Your Honor, Elizabeth Wilson created her will with sound mind and clear intention. The medical records will show she was mentally competent when the will was executed. Witness testimony will establish that Katherine Wilson was her mother's primary caregiver throughout her illness, while James Wilson was notably absent. This case is simply about respecting Elizabeth Wilson's final wishes. Dad was called as the first witness, taking the stand with a solemn expression I recognized from his business negotiations, what Mom called his closing the deal face. Reynolds led him through a well-rehearsed testimony about his perfect marriage and devotion to Mom during her illness. Dad described finding the coerced will and his shock at being cut out of the estate plans they had supposedly made together. Elizabeth and I had always planned to leave everything to each other, Dad said, his voice catching convincingly. We discussed it many times over the years. This new document goes against everything she ever wanted. I watched him closely, noticing the small tells I'd recognized since childhood that signaled he was lying. The slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way he adjusted his tie when fabricating details. To anyone else, he appeared to be a grieving husband, but I could see the calculated performance. Mr. Wilson, Reynolds continued, how would you describe your relationship with your daughter prior to your wife's illness? Dad sighed heavily, as if the question pained him. Katherine and I had our differences. She chose to pursue her own path rather than join the family business, which was disappointing but her choice. We remained cordial, though distant. And during your wife's illness, Katherine appeared suddenly, taking over Elizabeth's care and isolating her from me. I was busy ensuring our finances could cover the medical expenses, working longer hours to provide for my wife's treatments. Katherine used that time to turn Elizabeth against me. Every word was a lie, but delivered with such conviction that I saw Judge Blackwell watching me for my reaction. I maintained a neutral expression with effort. Reynolds produced financial records showing Dad's business accounts and withdrawals he claimed were for medical expenses. The selective documentation painted him as a generous provider while concealing the offshore accounts I had discovered. By lunchtime, I was shaking with suppressed anger. In the courthouse bathroom, I splashed water on my face. He's lying about everything, I told Andrea. Mom's insurance covered most of her treatment. I was there every day. He would sometimes disappear for days. I know, Andrea said calmly. And we have evidence to prove it. My cross-examination this afternoon will start exposing inconsistencies. Trust the process, Katherine. When court resumed, Andrea approached the stand with hospital visitor logs I hadn't even known existed. Mr. Wilson, these logs show you visited your wife exactly 7 times during her 3-week hospitalization following her major surgery. Is that correct? Dad's composure slipped slightly. I don't recall the exact number of visits. The logs require visitors to sign in and out. Your signature appears 7 times. During the same period, Katherine's signature appears 42 times, often showing she stayed overnight. Does that refresh your memory? The hospital wasn't the only place I cared for my wife, Dad countered, his voice hardening. Our home was where I provided most support. We'll address that momentarily, Andrea replied. First, would you explain why your credit card records show you dining at Castello's restaurant on the evening of October 15th last year, when your wife was in emergency surgery following complications? Dad's facade cracked further. I needed to eat. Costello's is 50 miles from the hospital, Mr. Wilson. And the receipt shows dinner for two with a $200 bottle of wine. Was this part of providing for your wife's care? Reynolds objected, but the damage was done. Judge Blackwell had noticed Dad's growing discomfort. As Andrea methodically dismantled his timeline of events, his carefully constructed narrative began unraveling. By the end of the day, Dad was showing visible anger, his responses becoming shorter and more defensive. Judge Blackwell adjourned until morning, instructing him to return for continued cross-examination. In the hallway afterward, I spotted Dad laughing with Reynolds near the water fountain, unaware I could see them. The contrast between his courtroom grief and this moment of careless mirth confirmed everything I already knew about his performance. Tomorrow we present our evidence, Andrea said as we gathered our materials. Get some rest tonight. It's going to be a long day. I returned home exhausted but determined. The USB drive I'd discovered was waiting on my laptop. Taking a deep breath, I plugged it in and opened the single video file it contained. What I saw would change everything. I barely slept after viewing the USB contents. The video showed Dad in the hidden basement room, methodically sorting cash into piles while on a phone call, discussing what sounded like money laundering through his development projects. More damning was a recorded conversation with his accountant about keeping the IRS in the dark and ensuring Mom never finds out about our arrangements. The timestamp showed it was from Mom's hidden camera, recorded just months before her diagnosis. Morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully in a navy dress and blazer that projected professionalism while honoring Mom's favorite color. Andrea met me at the courthouse steps, noticing my exhaustion immediately. "Rough night?" she asked. "I found something," I whispered. "Evidence on a USB drive Mom hid. Financial crimes. Conversations about hiding money. Should we use it?" Andrea pulled me aside, away from passing ears. "Did you bring it?" I nodded, patting my bag. "Let me see it at lunch break. For now, we stick to our strategy. You're testifying first today, and we need you focused." The courtroom seemed more crowded than yesterday. News of the contentious will contest had apparently spread. Dad and Reynolds were already seated. Dad looking refreshed and confident after yesterday's minor setbacks. Judge Blackwell called the court to order, and Andrea called me as our first witness. As I took the stand and was sworn in, I felt a strange calm replace my anxiety. Mom had prepared me for this moment more than I realized. Andrea started gently. "Miss Wilson, please describe your relationship with your mother." "Mom was my best friend and strongest supporter," I said, my voice steady. "We spoke at least 3 times a week, even after I moved to Philadelphia. She visited me monthly, and I came home for Sunday dinners when possible." "And when did you learn of your mother's cancer diagnosis?" "She called me immediately after her appointment. It was February 10th last year. I drove straight to their house and was there when she told Dad the news." "What was your father's reaction to the diagnosis?" "He seemed concerned about the insurance coverage and how her illness would affect his schedule. His first comment was that he couldn't cancel his business trip to Chicago the following week." Andrea methodically established my role as Mom's primary caregiver through medical records, FMLA documentation, and my detailed calendar showing daily care activities. I described the progression of Mom's illness and the treatments she endured. "Did your father participate in your mother's care during her illness?" "Minimally. He attended her initial oncology appointment but missed most subsequent ones. He claimed work demands prevented his involvement, though he managed to attend 3 golf tournaments during her treatment period. I felt Dad's glare but didn't look in his direction." "Was your mother mentally clear during her illness?" "Yes," I said firmly. "She had difficult days physically, but she remained mentally sharp until her final hours. She graded papers from her hospital bed 2 weeks before she died. She completed the New York Times crossword puzzle daily. Her oncologist repeatedly noted her exceptional mental clarity in her medical records." "Did you ever discuss estate planning with your mother?" "Only after she brought it up. She told me she was updating her will to ensure her wishes were followed. She never shared the specific contents until after it was executed." Andrea introduced Mom's journals documenting her decision-making process regarding the will, her sound mental state, and her concerns about Dad's potential reaction. I read a particularly poignant entry from 3 months before her death. I need to ensure Katherine is protected after I'm gone. James has his separate funds I'm not supposed to know about. The house should go to our daughter, who has shown true love and devotion. I am of sound mind making this decision, though my body fails me. When Andrea finished, Reynolds approached for cross-examination, his expression predatory. Miss Wilson, you stand to gain significantly from this supposedly authentic will, don't you? I stand to receive what my mother wanted me to have. Convenient that she decided this while dependent on you for care, isn't it? My mother made her own decisions throughout her life and illness. Reynolds paced before the stand. Your father worked tirelessly for decades to provide the comfortable lifestyle you grew up with. Yet you claim he was uninvolved in your mother's care? I'm stating facts. The visitor logs, medical records, and witness testimonies support this. His questioning grew increasingly aggressive, attempting to portray me as calculating and greedy. When he suggested I had pressured Mom while she was medicated, I felt my composure slipping. My mother was on minimal pain medication until her final week, I said, my voice tight. Her will was executed months before that. The medical records clearly show her medication schedule. Reynolds abruptly changed tactics. Let's talk about your father's home office. You've been living in the house since your mother's death. Have you entered his private spaces without permission? Dad suddenly leaned forward, whispering urgently to a colleague. I realized Reynolds was steering dangerously close to the hidden basement room. I've been cataloging the house contents for the estate inventory, as required by the court, I answered carefully. Have you been in the basement of the home? Yes, it's part of the house. And did you remove or tamper with any items belonging to your father? Judge Blackwell interrupted. Counselor, what relevance does this have to the will contest? Reynolds smiled smoothly. Your Honor, we believe Miss Wilson has been searching for and potentially removing financial documents belonging to Mr. Wilson in an attempt to strengthen her case. The judge turned to me. Miss Wilson, have you removed any documents from the home? It was the opening I needed. I haven't removed any documents, Your Honor. But I did discover something concerning while inventorying the house. Dad's face drained of color. He scribbled something and passed it to Reynolds, who quickly tried to redirect. Your Honor, this line of questioning is irrelevant to. I'd like to hear what Miss Wilson discovered. Judge Blackwell interrupted, noting Dad's obvious discomfort. While examining the basement, I noticed discrepancies between the current layout and the original house blueprints, I explained. There appears to be a hidden room containing financial records that may be relevant to my mother's estate planning decisions. The courtroom fell silent. Reynolds conferred urgently with Dad, whose agitation was now visible to everyone. Judge Blackwell's interest was piqued. Miss Wilson, are you suggesting there's a concealed space in the family home containing financial records? Yes, Your Honor. My mother referenced it in her journals. I believe she discovered it before her illness and that it influenced her estate planning decisions. Reynolds jumped up. Your Honor, this is absurd. Miss Wilson is clearly fabricating. I'm not fabricating anything, I said firmly. I can provide the house blueprints showing the discrepancy, and my mother's journal entries referencing her discovery. The judge studied Dad's increasingly agitated demeanor. Mr. Reynolds, does your client wish to address these allegations? Reynolds conferred with Dad again before responding. Your Honor, if Miss Wilson has been exploring private areas of the house without authorization, we would like to amend our complaint to include. They're not addressing the existence of the room, Andrea interjected, only attempting to distract with procedural concerns. Judge Blackwell seemed to reach a decision. We'll take a brief recess. Counsel for both parties, please approach the bench. As the courtroom began to clear, I stepped down from the witness stand. Andrea motioned for me to join them at the bench, where the judge had remained seated. Reynolds and Dad approached from the other side. Given the serious nature of Miss Wilson's claims and Mr. Wilson's visible reaction, Judge Blackwell said quietly, I believe we need to address this matter in chambers before proceeding. Reynolds objected, but the judge overruled him. My chambers, 5 minutes. As we filed toward the judge's private chambers, I leaned toward Andrea and whispered the 2 words that would change everything. Secret basement. Dad's head snapped toward me, his face ashen. The judge, observing his reaction, raised an eyebrow. In that moment, I knew the truth was finally going to come out. Judge Blackwell's chambers felt oppressively small with all of us crowded inside. The judge sat behind her desk while Dad, Reynolds, Andrea, and I took seats in a tense semicircle before her. "This is highly irregular, Your Honor," Reynolds began. "My client is here to contest a will, not defend against vague accusations about hidden rooms." "There's nothing vague about a concealed space containing financial records," Judge Blackwell replied, "especially when it appears to be causing your client significant distress." She turned to me. "Miss Wilson, please explain exactly what you found and how it relates to this case." I took a deep breath. While inventorying the house after my mother's death, I discovered discrepancies in the basement dimensions compared to the original blueprints. Behind a false wall, I found a hidden room containing financial records, offshore account documentation, and evidence of assets never disclosed to my mother. "This is absurd," Dad interjected, his voice strained. "She's making up stories to distract from her manipulation of Elizabeth." "I have photographs," I countered, pulling out my phone and opening the image gallery, and the USB drive Mom hid with video evidence. As I passed my phone to Judge Blackwell, Dad's composure cracked completely. "She's delusional like her mother," he shouted. "Elizabeth was always paranoid, making up conspiracies about me." Judge Blackwell's expression hardened. "Mr. Wilson, I caution you against making unfounded accusations about your late wife's mental state in my chambers." She scrolled through the photos, her expression growing more serious with each image. "These appear to show significant offshore accounts and property deeds not in your joint names, Mr. Wilson. Can you explain this?" Dad looked cornered. "Those are private business matters. Katherine broke into my private office, so you're acknowledging this room exists?" Judge Blackwell asked sharply. Dad realized his mistake too late. "It's a secure space for business documents. There's nothing illegal about having a private office. In a hidden room behind a false wall?" The judge's skepticism was palpable. Andrea interjected. "Your Honor, if Mr. Wilson maintained separate assets unknown to his wife, it directly relates to her estate planning decisions. The will's provision for Mr. Wilson may reflect her awareness of these hidden resources." Reynolds attempted damage control. "Your Honor, even if such a room exists, any evidence obtained through unauthorized exploration would be inadmissible." "That's for me to determine," Judge Blackwell replied. "Given the serious questions raised, I'm ordering an inspection of the property with court-appointed officials present." She checked her calendar. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Until then, this court is adjourned." As we left the chambers, Dad grabbed my arm in the empty hallway. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "Drop this now, and I'll let you have the house." "It's not about the house anymore," I replied, pulling away. "It's about Mom's truth." Andrea witnessed the exchange and quickly intervened, separating us as a court officer approached. "Mr. Wilson, I suggest you not approach my client again without counsel present." Dad stormed off with Reynolds, but not before I heard him mutter, "She'll regret this decision." The court officer, having overheard, asked if I wanted to file a report about the threat. I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just happened. Later that evening, Andrea called with an update. Reynolds filed an emergency motion to exclude any evidence from the alleged hidden room, claiming invasion of privacy. The judge denied it and reiterated tomorrow's inspection order. "Are you okay staying in the house tonight?" I hesitated, suddenly afraid to be alone in the house that had concealed so many secrets. "My Aunt Judith is staying with me," I assured her. "But thanks for checking." After hanging up, Judith and I sat in the kitchen, the house unnervingly quiet. "Your mother would be proud of you," she said, squeezing my hand. "Standing up to him couldn't have been easy." "I still can't believe she lived with this for so long," I replied. "Finding out about his hidden finances, planning to leave him, then getting sick. It's so unfair." "Elizabeth always protected others, especially you," Judith said softly, "even when it cost her." That night, I finally examined the USB drive contents thoroughly. Beyond the video I'd already seen were dozens more. Dad's own recordings of financial transactions, conversations with business partners about tax avoidance schemes, and most damning, a footage of him discussing how to hide assets during a potential divorce if Elizabeth ever gets any ideas. I sent the files to Andrea immediately. Her response came within minutes. This changes everything. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be intense. Morning brought news vans outside the house. Somehow, word had spread about the dramatic courtroom revelations and the scheduled inspection. Andrea arrived early, helping me prepare for what would likely be a media circus. Don't speak to reporters, she advised. Let the evidence speak for itself. The court-appointed inspector arrived precisely at 9 a.m., followed by Judge Blackwell, who had decided to oversee the inspection personally, an unusual move reflecting the case's increasingly serious nature. Dad and Reynolds pulled up last. Dad attempting to control the situation immediately. I demand parameters for this inspection, he said as we assembled in the foyer. Certain areas contain confidential business information protected by attorney-client privilege. Mr. Wilson, this inspection was ordered to verify specific claims about a concealed space. Judge Blackwell replied firmly. Let's proceed to the basement. Dad tried one last desperate tactic. This is a violation of my privacy rights. That area contains proprietary business information that could damage my company if exposed. The judge's patience was wearing thin. Mr. Wilson, this is a family residence, not a business premise. If you've been conducting business activities here that you're concerned about exposing, that raises separate questions entirely. Defeated, Dad followed as I led everyone to the basement. Standing before the shelving unit concealing the hidden door, I turned to the inspector. The entrance is behind this unit. As the inspector moved the shelving aside, revealing the outline of the door and the drywall, Dad's shoulders slumped visibly. The hidden room stood exposed, exactly as I had described, filled with filing cabinets and financial records. Judge Blackwell's expression was severe as she surveyed the hidden office. Mr. Wilson, would you care to explain this? Dad's response was a whispered consultation with Reynolds, who then addressed the judge. Your Honor, my client asserts his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination at this time. The inspection continued methodically, with the court-appointed official photographing and documenting everything. When he found the camera Mom had installed to gather evidence, Dad's attempt to have it excluded as unauthorized surveillance was quickly denied when the inspector noted it was installed in plain sight within the hidden room itself. This matter has clearly expanded beyond a simple will contest, Judge Blackwell announced as the inspection concluded. I'm ordering all records in this room sealed pending further investigation. Mr. Wilson, you are not to remove, destroy, or alter any documents in this home. As we returned upstairs, Dad's phone buzzed repeatedly with news alerts. His business associates were already distancing themselves as courthouse rumors spread. In the kitchen, Judge Blackwell addressed us all. Based on today's findings, I'm inclined to validate Elizabeth Wilson's will as written. Mr. Reynolds, does your client wish to continue contesting in light of these developments? Reynolds, looking uncomfortable, conferred briefly with Dad. Your Honor, we request time to reconsider our position. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to withdraw your contest, she replied. Otherwise, we resume in court with this new evidence admitted. As they prepared to leave, I caught Dad staring at Mom's garden visible through the kitchen window, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I glimpsed not the controlling, deceitful man I'd exposed, but someone losing everything he'd built through his own deceptions. It brought no joy, only a profound sadness for what our family could have been. The judge's chambers felt smaller than before as we gathered the next morning. Dad and Reynolds had requested a private settlement conference rather than continuing in open court, a clear sign they recognized their untenable position. Before we discuss settlement terms, Judge Blackwell began. I want to understand the full context of this situation. Miss Wilson, what do you believe your mother intended with her estate planning decisions? I'd spent the night reflecting on exactly this question, reading through Mom's journals and letters, seeking the heart of her intentions. My mother discovered my father's financial deceptions about a year before her diagnosis, I explained. According to her journals, she had consulted a divorce attorney and was preparing to leave him. Then came her cancer diagnosis, which changed her immediate plans but not her determination to protect me from his control. Judge Blackwell nodded. And the will was her solution? Part of it, I said. She knew he had hidden assets far exceeding what showed in their joint finances. She believed leaving the family home to me was fair given what he had concealed. The judge turned to Dad, who sat unnaturally still. Mr. Wilson, do you wish to respond to these characterizations? After consulting with Reynolds, Dad spoke formally. Your Honor, I wish to withdraw my contest of the will. Recent revelations have made continued litigation inadvisable. The clinical language couldn't hide the defeat in his voice. What had begun as his aggressive grab for Mom's assets had exposed his own carefully hidden financial crimes. The IRS had already been contacted by the court about potential tax evasion, and his business reputation was crumbling. Very well, Judge Blackwell said. The will of Elizabeth Wilson is hereby validated as written. Miss Wilson, the house and specified assets are legally yours. She paused, looking between us. Is there anything else either party wishes to address before we conclude? Dad remained silent, but I had one request. Your Honor, there are family items of sentimental value that have disappeared from the house since my mother's death. I'd like those returned. Judge Blackwell turned to Dad expectantly. I'll have them delivered, he said tightly. As the judge finalized the paperwork, I felt no triumph, only relief that Mom's wishes would be honored and sadness for the broken family bonds. When we left the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Andrea fielded their questions with minimal responses while I slipped to the car. As we drove away, I saw Dad surrounded by journalists, his carefully constructed public image disintegrating in real time. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. I expected the promised delivery of family items, but instead found Dad standing alone on the porch, a small box in his hands. May I come in? He asked, his voice lacking its usual authority. I hesitated but eventually stepped aside. He entered the house that was now legally mine, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. Elizabeth's jewelry and photo albums, he said, setting the box on the coffee table. There are more things in storage. I'll send the key. An awkward silence filled the room. Without his courtroom performance or business persona, he seemed smaller somehow. Why? I finally asked. The hidden accounts, the lies to Mom, all of it, why? He sank onto the couch, suddenly looking his age. It started small, a separate account for business opportunities Elizabeth wouldn't approve of, then another for investments she thought too risky. He shook his head. Each step made the next one easier. And the other woman in the photos? His expression tightened. That's not a conversation we need to have. You owe me the truth, I insisted. All of it. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Dad revealed how his need for control had warped into separate lives, the respectable family man and the ruthless businessman with hidden assets. He admitted discovering Mom had found his secret room months before her diagnosis. I convinced her it was just tax strategy, nothing illegal, he said. I thought she believed me. She never did, I replied. She was gathering evidence for divorce. Then the cancer came, he said quietly. And everything changed. He described confronting Mom after finding her meeting with an estate attorney. She said she was just updating her will. Standard procedure given her diagnosis. I believed her because I wanted to. The most painful revelation was learning that Mom had directly confronted him about the offshore accounts just days before her death. She told me she knew everything and had secured your future beyond my reach, he said, his voice hollow. I was angry, accused her of betrayal. It was the last real conversation we had. As Dad prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Katherine, I'm facing serious legal consequences. The IRS investigation alone. He didn't finish the sentence. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just understanding that I never meant for this to happen. That's the problem, Dad, I replied. You never meant for any consequence to happen to you. But they were always happening to Mom. And to me. After he left, I sat in Mom's studio surrounded by her paintings, finally understanding the full weight she had carried. She had discovered her husband's betrayal, faced a terminal diagnosis, and still found the strength to protect me. Her courage was breathtaking. The next few weeks brought rapid changes. Dad's legal troubles mounted as the IRS and FBI investigated his financial dealings. The offshore accounts were frozen, and his business partners distanced themselves. He sold his condo and moved to a smaller apartment across town. Through Andrea, I learned he had reached a plea arrangement on the tax evasion charges, requiring substantial restitution payments and likely including some jail time. The man who had built his life on control was watching it crumble around him. I focused on healing and honoring Mom's memory, converting her studio into a memorial space with her artwork prominently displayed. Among her unfinished paintings, I found sketches for a series she'd titled Truth Beneath, her artistic processing of her discoveries about Dad. One evening, as I sorted through more of Mom's papers, I found a letter addressed to me that I hadn't seen before. My dearest Katherine, if you're reading this, you've discovered the truth I tried to protect you from for so long. I'm sorry for the burden this knowledge brings, but more sorry I won't be there to help you bear it. Your father is not an evil man, but his need for control consumed him until deception became second nature. I stayed far longer than I should have, making excuses for his behavior and believing I could change him. That was my mistake. The will is my final act of motherly protection. The house that holds our memories belongs with you, the daughter who filled it with love. Whatever your father has hidden away, he will keep. Justice has its own timetable. Remember this always. You are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and loved beyond measure. Mom. I pressed the letter to my heart, feeling her presence as clearly as if she stood beside me. In protecting me, she had given me not just material security, but the greater gifts of truth and freedom, the very things she had sacrificed in her own life. The secret basement that had concealed so much darkness had ultimately brought everything into the light, just as Mom had intended all along. 3 months after the courthouse revelation, autumn painted the neighborhood in gold and crimson. I'd settled into Mom's house, my house now, and was slowly transforming it from a place of secrets into a home of light and truth. Dad's legal battles had played out largely as expected. He accepted a plea deal on the tax evasion charges, requiring substantial restitution and 18 months in federal prison. The sentence would have been longer without his cooperation in revealing offshore banking practices that helped authorities with other cases. Andrea had advised me to pursue additional charges for the missing valuables he'd taken after Mom's death, but I declined. The criminal charges are enough, I told her. I don't want to spend more years of my life in courtrooms fighting him. My decision wasn't about forgiveness, but about freedom, mine, not his. Every hour spent pursuing vengeance was an hour not spent healing. That healing journey hadn't been easy. Therapy sessions twice weekly helped me process the complex trauma of discovering my father's double life while grieving my mother. My therapist specialized in adult children of psychologically abusive parents, helping me understand the dynamics that had shaped our family. Your mother protected you from the worst of his control, Dr. Martin observed during one session. But that protection came at a cost to her. I keep wondering if I could have helped her leave sooner, I admitted. If I'd recognized what was happening. Children aren't responsible for rescuing their parents. She reminded me gently. Elizabeth made her choices. And ultimately, she found her power. The experimental cancer treatments Mom had undergone became part of my healing process in an unexpected way. When reviewing her medical files, I discovered she had participated in a clinical trial that showed promising results for other patients, even though it hadn't saved her. With a portion of the estate proceeds, I established the Elizabeth Wilson Foundation to support ovarian cancer research, focusing on the experimental approach that had given Mom a few precious extra months. The foundation's first fundraiser featured an exhibition of Mom's artwork, including her unfinished Truth Beneath series. The family home underwent its own transformation. I hired contractors to completely renovate the basement, removing every trace of the secret room and converting the space into a bright art studio filled with natural light from new egress windows. We're taking out a load-bearing wall here, the contractor had warned. It'll be expensive. Take it out, I replied without hesitation. No more hidden spaces in this house. The symbolic demolition of that false wall was cathartic, each sledgehammer blow releasing years of suppressed emotion. When the renovation was complete, I invited Mom's art students to use the studio for weekly classes, filling the space with creativity and laughter. The backyard, which Dad had always maintained with rigid precision, became a wild English garden dedicated to Mom's memory. Native plants, butterfly bushes, and her favorite flowers grew in beautiful chaos, attracting hummingbirds and becoming a neighborhood landmark. My relationship with extended family slowly mended as the truth about Dad's actions became understood. Aunt Judith moved to a nearby town to be closer, providing the family connection I'd missed for so many years. "Your mother would be so proud of how you've handled everything," she told me during Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd established. Not just standing up to James, but rebuilding afterward. 6 months into Dad's incarceration, I received a request for a visitation. After considerable deliberation, I agreed to one meeting at the Federal Correctional Facility where he was serving his sentence. The man who sat across from me in the visiting room barely resembled the imposing figure who had dominated my childhood. Prison had aged him visibly. His hair had thinned, and his shoulders hunched forward in the institutional jumpsuit. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice lacking its former authority. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," I replied honestly. Our conversation was stilted at first, filled with awkward pauses and careful words. Dad attempted his old manipulation tactics, speaking about misunderstandings and overreactions by the authorities. I cut him short. "I didn't come here for justifications, Dad." His mask slipped, revealing a flash of the controlling man beneath. "Then why did you come?" "Closure," I said simply. "And to tell you that despite everything, I don't hate you. I pity you." His eyes narrowed. "I don't want your pity. That's not surprising. You never wanted anything from me except obedience. But pity is what I have to offer. You've lost everything that matters, your freedom, your reputation, your family, all because you couldn't be honest." "You sound just like your mother," he said, though whether it was meant as criticism or observation, I couldn't tell. "Thank you," I replied. "That's the greatest compliment you could give me." As our visitation time ended, Dad made one last attempt to establish control. "When I get out, we should talk about what happens to the house. It was my money that bought it, after all." I stood to leave. "The house is settled, Dad. The offshore accounts are settled. The legal matters are settled. There's nothing left to discuss." "So that's it?" he asked. 30 years as your father counts for nothing?" "You were never really my father," I said quietly. "You were the man who lived in our house and made the rules. Mom was my parent, the one who loved me unconditionally, supported my dreams, and ultimately saved me from you. That's what parents do." I left without looking back, knowing it would likely be our last meeting. The closure I sought wasn't about reconciliation, but about setting boundaries that even prison walls couldn't establish. Back home, I resumed my nursing career with a new focus on patient advocacy, particularly for elderly patients vulnerable to financial abuse. The experiences with Dad had given me insight into recognizing controlling relationships that proved valuable in healthcare settings. I also started a support group for adult children of psychologically abusive parents, creating the resource I wished I'd had during Mom's illness and the aftermath. The group met monthly in my renovated basement studio, the transformed space serving as testament that healing was possible. An unexpected friendship developed with Officer Mark Daniels, who had taken my initial complaint about Dad's threatening behavior. He volunteered security services for the Elizabeth Wilson Foundation events, and our professional connection gradually evolved into something more personal. Through it all, I maintained a journal addressed to Mom, sharing my healing journey and the ways her courage continued to guide me. "I finished your painting today, Mom. The one of the lake house you never completed. I'm not the artist you were, but I added the sunrise you always said was your favorite part of our vacations there. It hangs now where your safe once hid light, replacing secrets, just as you'd want." My final courthouse appearance came when Dad's restitution payment schedule was formalized. Judge Blackwell, who had overseen the original will contest, recognized me in the hallway afterward. "Miss Wilson," she said warmly, "how are you doing?" "Better," I replied honestly. "Rebuilding." She nodded thoughtfully. "What you did took remarkable courage. Standing up to family is often harder than confronting strangers." "I had a good example in my mother," I said. "The best legacy anyone can leave," she agreed. Dad appeared briefly, escorted by corrections officers. He looked smaller than ever, diminished by the consequences of his actions finally catching up to him. Our eyes met across the hallway, and I felt a moment of unexpected peace. His power over me was gone completely. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in Mom's favorite colors, I hung her completed lake house painting in the spot where her hidden safe had once concealed the truth. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, the truth now displayed openly where secrets had once lived. In Mom's studio, surrounded by her artwork and creativity, I felt her presence more strongly than ever. She had fought her battle quietly, with dignity and foresight. My battle had been public and dramatic, culminating in that courtroom moment when two whispered words cracked open decades of deception. Different approaches, but the same fundamental lesson. True love protects with truth, not secrets. Has your family ever hidden important truths from you? Or have you discovered something that changed how you saw someone close to you? This journey taught me that sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most meaningful healing. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life family stories. Your comments about similar experiences or how you've overcome family betrayal mean the world to me. Share this with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in family struggles. Thank you for witnessing my journey from secrets to truth, from pain to healing. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that finally set us free.